Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's me, your favourite randomised gaming editor, Random Gamer Riven, and once again this is another first indie impressions video. So today we're going to be looking at the recent remake and release of Skool Daze Reskooled, which is a remake of the classic game Skool Daze. It's sequel Back to School, and it's got a few additional stages as well added in, so it's a very complete package for a remake. Now, before I begin, I should say that Alternative Software have kindly provided us with a Steam key in order to look at the game. And while they provided us with a Steam key, Randomised Gaming does maintain full creative control of the video. So Skool Daze Reskooled is published by, as I said, Alternative Software, and it was developed in part with Innovation Team. And it's based on the original ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64 games. So if you're outside of the UK, you may not have heard of Skool Daze or its sequel Back to Schools. It was originally the first game, Skool Daze, was released in 1984 and is seen as a bit of a cult classic on the Spectrum. However, I must confess I never actually played it when it first came out on the ZX Spectrum. I was more playing the Dizzy games, Bobble Bear, and things like Horace Goes Sing and Chucky Egg, and quite a few arcade ports, or I should say bad arcade ports, as the Spectrum really couldn't ever do anything remotely close to the arcade originals. So the premise of Skool Daze is that basically you play as a student known as Eric. Basically, you're about to get a very bad school report from your teachers, and it's your job to try and hijack that school report and make sure your parents don't get it. Now, best described as a platformer puzzle game, it's actually a really interesting design in how it plays. It's fair to say there have been few games that even play remotely to how Skool Daze does it. It's actually a really nice concept. Basically, you have to go around the school, you have to complete a number of puzzling tasks, all the time while avoiding being given lines for the various teachers. And you get given lines for being late to class, for being knocked out on the floor by an opponent bully as a teacher walks by, and quite a few other things. So you do have to be very careful. There are actually four main students. There's you, Eric. There's Angel Face, a bully who will punch you whenever he gets the chance. There's Boy Wonder, supposedly the most popular guy at the school, who will also try to bully you around if you're not careful. And then there's Einstein the SWAT, who will dob you in every chance he gets. So if you're late to lesson, the first thing he will do is say, "Please sir, I cannot tell a lie, so-and-so isn't there." And at which point a teacher will then go running around the school trying to find you, with your only weapons being your trusty catapult and your fist. So yes, you can actually go around bullying the other students yourself if you want to be mean, or you can be an absolute SWAT and go to every lesson accordingly. It's very interesting how this plays, because it does remind me a lot of school. Now, admittedly, if you're playing this from a perspective of someone who's not from the UK, you might find Skool Daze very different to how your schooling life was, and I would say it's quintessentially a very British UK game with how it plays. And even now, I think Skool Daze doesn't quite play to how modern schools would be, but there's a sort of similar, British schools still follow similar sort of structures they did in the 70s and 80s, roughly with this time period that this game's based on. So the game itself actually has four levels. You get the initial tutorial level, you get the original Skool Daze one, you get Back to School, which was the 1985 sequel, and then you get a brand new stage called New School. And each of these schools have different puzzle and elements you have to do in order to finish them. Now, the premise is always the same. You've got to get your school report back, and in the first game you have to light up all the shields in the school, at which point you can then effectively shoot all the teachers to obtain a passcode, all but one I should add. One of them is a bit more tricky to obtain its passcode, and at which point you then need to get the passcode to unlock the safe in the staff room, and at the same time, once you've done that, you then need to revert all the shields back. So it's actually quite an interesting concept. Now, the first thing, although you have a pea shooter, you can't actually shoot up. So in order to shoot the shields that are above you, some you can reach and jump just by jumping up. However, most of them require you either bounce a bullet off a teacher's head with a slingshot, so when you shoot a teacher they fall down, you have to bounce a bullet up and hit the shield, or you have to knock another student down and kindly jump on top of them and then jump up to touch the shield. So yes, you do end up being a bit of a bully if you're going to play this game to win it quickly, I have to admit. It's quite amusing. and all the time you have to avoid getting lined. So often if you shoot a teacher, well, the tactic is to shoot a teacher is basically if you shoot a teacher and you're in a close proximity, you will automatically be issued lines. The more times you do it, the higher the lines you're issued and penalised, because it starts at 100, 200 and then goes up, etc. However, there are a few tactics. One, the teachers will only go on the closest student near to them when they dish out the line. So if you shoot a catapult just as someone like the bully Angel Face walks by, then all of a sudden Angel Face will be given the lines and not you. So there's a very subtle tactic, very much like how Real School was. I can think quite a few times teachers incorrectly blamed one student for another one's crimes. And it's clear the original husband and wife team who actually worked on the original clearly put a lot of British schooling life into this game. Graphically, the game's been given a real facelift. The graphics are very simplistic, quite bright and colourful. They're perhaps not as detailed as I'd like. They seem to have been styled a little bit after the original. I would have quite liked to have seen like school emblems and a few other things on the students, but that's okay. They work functionally, but they could be slightly better, I feel. I know this is originally an iPads and iPhone game, and I know some people might instantly go, ooh, no, iPad, mobile. No, this is actually a good port. I did really enjoy it. I did have one or two qualms with the joypad control selecting and typing stuff using the keyboard they provide in game, but when I used the actual PC keyboard, it was fine. Now, while I haven't played the original Spectrum version, this does appear based on the videos seem to be a very close version to it, and it does include all the special events in the original Skool Daze as well, such as the Angel Face Mumps event, which is so far the only one I've actually had. When you start Skool Daze, you'll occasionally get a student come up to you and say, hey, such and such is going on, and this time I had the Angel Face has mumps, don't let him touch you, and that actually does change the playthroughs a bit more, because it makes it a bit more trickier, because in that playthrough I basically couldn't allow Angel Face to touch me or else you get an instant game over. You basically told you've got months times to go hard, and that's actually really hard. I don't think I lasted that long as he punched me fairly quickly, but there's something to remind that there are some additional challenges in there. When you get those random events, they really do make the game a lot more challenging. Now, the sequel Back to School adds in a whole raft of new mechanics. It added in a caretaker character who was responsible for locking the gates and opening them between the two schools. It added in a female school, so there was a boys' school and a female school, and you would have to traverse between the two at certain points in the game. Unfortunately, if you were caught in the female school, you're automatically given lines. They also added in a new female teacher called Mistake. And the puzzles for how you finish the game are very different to the original. You had to catch a frog, catch a rat, and you need to grab a water pistol to help soak the teachers in various substances. But ultimately the aim was the same as the original. You had to get your school report and basically get out of the school at the same time. Sound and music wise, there's not a huge amount of audio. I mean, you got the various sound effects. The one sound effect I didn't like was they carried over the ZX Spectrum sound whenever you were given lines, which is it's a very noticeable grating sound. I mean, it's deliberately done. It worked well. You know instantly when you've got lines or when someone else has got lines, but it was one of the things I wish they'd slightly redone the sound effect. There's not a huge amount of music, but it has been implemented very subtly. And they do this by implementing a very calm, surreal music when you're sitting in class learning lessons, or being a good student, you're getting quite nice music playing in the background as you're waiting for the lesson to end. Whereas if you are skiving a lesson, as soon as the SWAT or Einstein tells the teacher that you're missing, you'll instantly start hearing a sort of da-da-da-da-da-da chase music. So it's very subtly implemented, and it does work quite well. You know instantly whether you're being a good student or whether the teacher's currently looking for you by the sound of the music. Then you've got to try and hide from the class. Admittedly, it's possible quite easily to keep the teachers down by shooting them with your slingshot, and that is actually one tactic. If you can delay the teacher from finding you long enough, you won't get any lines and you'll clear the lesson. So the pace of the game is very fast moving, with each lesson only lasting about 2 to 3 minutes at max, so you're always constantly changing and having to move around the school. Now, the one slight gripe I did have with Skool Daze when I played through it is that there's a slight random element with one of the teachers. In order to get the code to unlock the safe from one of the teachers, Mr. Creek, you have to get his date of birth, and you do that, you need to have him to tell you something in one of the lessons. The problem is it can take a little while to occur, and I had an issue where I had something like 20 minutes worth of gameplay where I didn't get one single lesson from Mr. Creek, and that was slightly annoying waiting for that to occur. And finally, the new school does play very much like the original 2 games. It's very nicely put together. This time round just setting a comprehensive, and there are a number of new tasks, and it perfectly encapsulates the feel of the original games. Another new feature is the ability in this remake to play as any of the school children. So that's Eric, Angel Face, Boy Wonder, Einstein, and you can also play as Eric's girlfriend from the sequel, Haley. You do have to unlock all the other characters, but it's a really nice extra they've added into the game, and it does actually slightly change up how the games play each of the different characters. Overall, I think it's a very good package, and I've actually really enjoyed playing this. Although I never played the original Skool Daze, I have actually found myself really quite liking this title. It's certainly not everyone's cup of tea. This is a very, very unique game with how it plays, and I can see a lot of people not liking it. But I think if you want something a bit different, this is definitely well worth a go. Certainly if you're a fan of the original Skool Daze, you'll almost certainly enjoy this. And if you like puzzle games and something a bit different, then I highly recommend it. It's priced $5.99 here in the UK, so it's going to be priced relevantly, and I'd say that's a decent price. I've got a few hours out of each level before I was able to finish them, and the ultimate goal is to get the best grade, which is A++ on each stage, and in order to do that you're going to have to finish each stage without getting a single line, which is going to be quite tricky, I have to admit. Certainly if you live outside the UK you may find the premise of Skool Daze a bit baffling, as being a British school child might not be of interest to you, but if you fancy something a bit different, I highly recommend it. I have really enjoyed this. It's a very well put together game. It's a very good remake by all accounts. I can't say for certain if everything is exactly the same as the original. I suspect there are 1 or 2 changes. If I had one other slight gripe, is that the tutorial level doesn't really tell you a lot of the mechanics needed to play the game, and I think it needs to be expanded a little bit. The tutorial stage feels a bit rushed. It doesn't explain like shooting catapult bullets off the top of teachers' heads and knocking students down to jump up and hit things. It's a bit of a weird, the tutorial level. It only shows you a few of them. It does feel a bit unfinished. And so I did have to resort to the hints guide of in-game to tell you how to navigate some of the stages, but once you know what you're doing, it's all good, and the hints guide does tell you everything you need to do, so that's really helpful. But I wish the hints guide had been given you a bit more in the tutorial, and the tutorial was a bit more fleshed out in game. But as far as indie first impressions go, this is a thumbs up from me. I highly recommend Skool Daze Reskooled. So with that said and done, all that's left for me to say is I have been your host, Random Gamer Riven, and as always, if you've enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button. Please do subscribe to Randomised Gaming, and as always, if you want more notifications about our content, please do hit that bell button. And also, if you like our stuff, please do share it as well.